And now we're going to shift from what the threat landscape is to how we go about mitigating against it. And I'm delighted to introduce Gerry Cantwell, Chief Technology Officer at UKCloudX, to talk to us a little bit about how they approach that at UKCloudX. So over to you, Gerry.
Great, thanks very much, Dan. And I would like to add my welcome to everyone to the third techUK Cyber Innovation Den. UK Cloud are proudly sponsoring this event for the second year in a row because we are firm believers in innovation, and particularly innovation in the UK by UK companies. I'd also like to thank Lee for his very informative brief on the current cyber attack landscape. Truly frightening, isn't it? One of the things that really stood out for me was that whole theme around Russia and China being targets themselves, as well as us all thinking of them as the origin of attacks. But really interesting to see that people are attacking the Russian citizens and Russian and Chinese institutions. It's a bit like getting into a cage fight with a 8-foot tall wrestler. You know, it's not the sort of thing that you would do without being very confident in your own abilities to defend yourself. As ever, these events only run smoothly if there has been meticulous preparation beforehand. So I'd again also like to thank the techUK team for all of their efforts in pulling this event together. We're really pleased to be able to welcome Matt Warman, MP and Minister for Digital Infrastructure, who will be joining us shortly, and delivering today's keynote speech. No doubt emphasising the government's commitment to investment in SMEs and innovation as part of the Build Back Better campaign. I'm also grateful to today's panelists, Nicola, Andy and Andrew, who have given up their valuable time to participate in today's event and to do their own preparation ahead of the pitches later today. And I'm pleased to see such a diverse cross-section of judges from across government and industry, bringing a much richer picture to our debate. And finally, my thanks to the people who are doing the pitches today, both for the work they have done to get themselves through to this stage, but also for sharing their innovations with the audience today. So I thought, as Dan said, just look a little bit at the cyber arena and why we need to innovate in the cyber arena, and why it's necessary that we have our own homegrown capabilities in this arena. So I guess the basic premise is that we all want to be safe online, whether that's as individuals, our families, the organizations that we work for, the institutions that we depend upon. We want the assurance that all of our information is being handled appropriately, and that the systems and services that we are using online are safe. We also know that there are lots of people out there, and Lee has just gone through a huge list of them, whether they are people, groups, organizations, nation states, who are out there in cyberspace who would wish to do us harm. Whether that is simple disinformation, online frauds, DDoS attacks, stealing of sensitive information, ransomware, compromising a law enforcement organization, the list is truly enormous. And the motivations behind those attacks are many and varied and diverse also, from just kudos amongst a bunch of script kiddies to financial gain to asymmetric warfare. It could be not just one of those things, but could be multiple of those things all at the same time. It's also clear that those actors are very skilled technically, and also that they don't conform to the international norms that we would expect to see, we would all want to see in cyberspace. So cybersecurity will continually be an arms race, where our defenses not only need to keep pace with technology advances and taking advantage of them, but they also need to be a step ahead of our adversaries. And it's a continual ratcheting up of capability on both sides, both defense and attack. Of course, the UK is part of a global economy, and we can't operate in isolation from other nations. But what we can do is create an environment which is amongst the safest places to operate online, attracting both inward investment and creating opportunities for those who have developed leading edge cyber products and services. Therefore, creating an ecosystem that encourages innovation and experimentation, that funds and incubates this innovation, and industry fora that publicizes and markets these innovations is core to the UK continuing to remain at the leading edge of cybersecurity developments. And we know that our adversaries, whoever they may be, are also investing in ways to exploit weak security, as Lee has just highlighted. Whether that's personnel, process, physical, or technological, all of those dimensions are at risk, and we need to be treating all of those in concert, not just looking at technology solutions. So we must continue to invest and continue to advance in all aspects of cybersecurity if we are continually to keep ourselves safe. For a whole range of reasons, not just financial and commercial ones, we need to see investment in UK products and services across people, process, information, technology, and facilities. An outcome of this investment will be products and services that we can trust, but it will also create a cadre of citizens with greater cyber awareness and an increasing set of cybersecurity skills that allow us to develop and sustain a critical mass of people with the skills, knowledge, and experience to grow the cybersecurity industry in the UK to the benefit of the wider economy. We will not attain that wider benefit if we just buy products and services from other nations. And we have a whole range of examples through our history of times when we have failed to invest in or sustain a particular part of the nation's capability. You can look at steelmaking, you can look at coal mining, you can look at shipbuilding. There's a whole range of different dimensions there. And one that I was personally involved in a few years back was the UK crypto industry, where we saw over a period of years a declining set of capabilities and companies who were in a position to be able to build sovereign capability. And sometimes you get to a point where that intervention, when it is required, comes too late. Sometimes it's just in time. And it's always the case that you look back on those and think, actually, we should have been in a position to intervene much, much earlier in this particular arena. So I'm really pleased that to see such a diverse set of pitches today, from products and services to education and training, to self-help, to compliance enforcement, or I think it's called mutually reinforcing behavior now. And it's great to see the UK industry, through vehicles like techUK, setting out challenges, showcasing new developments, and exploring the art of the possible in cyber innovation. I hope you all have a really enjoyable day today, and I hope you find the pitches both interesting and invigorating and thought-provoking. Certainly, it has been that way for myself and the other panelists. We've been looking through the paperwork that the various companies have submitted so far. And of course, reading it on paper and then seeing it in person are two different things. So I'm really looking forward to the actual pitches themselves today. That's all I was going to say this morning by way of introduction. I think there will be a few minutes for questions if there are any from the audience.
Thanks, Gerry. Yeah, so anyone with questions or comments, please put that in the chat or the Q&A portion. I'll start with one of my own, if that's all right, Gerry. I think you've had experience of the cyber sector from both the public sector perspective and the private sector perspective. What do you think the main strength of the UK cybersecurity sector is, and what would you say is the main weakness?
So I think the first is talent. We've got really, really talented people in the UK, and we're rightly proud of a whole bunch of engineering innovations over hundreds of years, and that continues with cybersecurity. We can see lots of first-generation initiatives coming out of the UK, lots of startups with really good ideas that then actually mature through the right investment and the right coaching and development into world-beating technology. So I think and that plays back not just to the companies themselves, but to the education system and the universities, et cetera, so things like the work that NCSE have been doing with the university sector to develop a whole series of accredited cybersecurity degrees, for example. All of those things help us advance in terms of the skill sets, the education, the knowledge that we are able to bring to bear. So that is truly, one of the things that we should be really proud of and keep investing in. In terms of things that we're not doing as well as we could do, I think there is something, and it pervades lots of organizations, about cybersecurity risk, particularly those organizations who have a focus on something that isn't technology related. And I've seen a number of organizations where they actually don't want a proper cybersecurity assessment, because it means it will be lodged on their board paperwork and they're going to have to do something about it, and they don't know what to do. So there is something about really utilizing the non-executive director cadre in the UK. And maybe that's something, I know the Institute of Directors have been doing something in that arena, in terms of educating non-exec directors to look for this type of things as part of audit committees, etc., where they can actually really dig into what an organization is doing about its cybersecurity. There is comfort in being the unconsciously incompetent. If you don't know about it, then you don't worry about it. It's when you're consciously incompetent that you start getting worried and you start flapping around in some cases. What we actually need to do is to bring boards across the UK to a position where they are consciously competent, that they are active in understanding cybersecurity, they've got the right sort of measures in place, they are funding cybersecurity to the right sort of level in their companies. And again, I came across organizations who, if they defended against script kiddies, who were just having a go at their online presence, that sort of thing, then they would all get pat in the back. But if they failed to defend against some advanced persistent threat, then people would say, oh well, yeah, we didn't expect you to be able to defend against that. I think it's true that all organizations need to be thinking about the range of threat actors and what might be attractive in their organizations, and be capable of putting in place a spectrum of defense across all of those different types of actors.
No, absolutely. I think that's an area where we've done some work recently around, the developing roles of people like the Chief Information Security Officer, what the board should be doing, how different executives should be engaging, and that kind of thing. Another question from the chat from David Watson. Sorry, someone's just put another one in so I can't see it. At Total AI, we collaborate widely to deliver information assurance capabilities. Does UKCloudX have any initiatives to support that approach? So I suppose it's a question about how UKCloudX would go about partnering with other organisations.
Yeah, so we have around 326 partners of all shapes and sizes, and obviously one of the big things that we in UKCloudX trade on is that sovereignty and security, particularly in the government market and the supply chain into government. So we absolutely work with a whole range of partners to make sure that the products that we are consuming are good. They have a whole bunch of security features built into them, but we also work with partners in terms of building secure services, including partners' products and services. So whether that be things like one-way diodes, cross-domain solutions, cryptos, you name it, all of those types of things come into play. And just going back to what we were discussing a second ago, one of the things we often find is that we have to support organizations in really understanding the security threats, and therefore what's the appropriate security solution for them. So yeah, very happy to work with Dave Watson and whoever else to develop that. And interestingly, what I failed to say in my brief earlier was, although we sponsored last year, one of the things we were really impressed with was the things that Surevine had done. And as a result of that Cyber Innovation Den last year, Surevine and ourselves are now partners. And so we're looking at all sorts of interesting things together to collaborate on. So very keen to use today as one of those vehicles to see who out there are like-minded in terms of complementary products and services, and see how we might work together.
Absolutely, and we'll hear from Surevine later in the agenda as well. I've got another quick question from me. I think, a few years ago we were talking about how, in previous decades, the innovation that went on within MOD in the national security space had then flowed down into the kind of civil arena, and how that's how in many ways that's kind of shifted on its head now. I wonder, UKCloudX obviously have a real strong focus on that national security space. Do you see the two kind of sides of our sector working together appropriately, and that technology feeding either way?
Yeah, I think we do. And even if there are some peculiarities about differences in the way in which different parts of the defence and national security sector operate, there is quite a lot of cross-fertilisation. And there is a sort of recognition that there needs to be jointery at times across everyone involved in the sort of higher assurance space, in order to have effective systems and services available. The interesting thing for me is that one of the things we are seeing is an increase in interest in both sovereign and secure capability from the regulated sector. So starting to look at people like the financial sector, the legal sector, those types of people who are very acutely aware of things like GDPR and all the sort of legal constraints that they need to work to, both in the UK and internationally. And we're seeing quite an interest across those sectors in the services that we have to offer, because they're now looking at things like advanced persistent threat. They probably previously didn't see themselves as being much of a target, but they're recognizing now that actually they may well be more of a target than they first appreciated, and therefore having to rethink some of their ways of working and some of their cyber defenses.
I think that kind of links to another question I had, which is around supply chain security. So part of our team is busily squirreling away trying to come up with a joint industry response to DCMS's call for views on security in the supply chain. I wonder how you see that debate developing, and we've particularly looked at CNI over the last few years as a heavily regulated part of the sector, and in many ways that the NIS directive and other things have meant that they've been on a bit of a journey. But now we're seeing with COVID that the digital transformation of all sectors is rapidly changing and accelerating, and we've seen the obvious breaches that touch on kind of supply chain and MSPs and that kind of thing. How do you see that change in developing, and is there anything we could do that's pretty straightforward to improve that space?
I think it's interesting when you look at people who are developing security products and services. Sometimes they are ignoring or not thinking about some of the basic fundamentals. We obviously have conversations with people left, right, and centre about security services and different offerings that they have. And one of my first questions to them is, what system are you developing that software on? And some of the answers that come back, you think, oh my God, do you really understand security? Because if you're doing it on that platform or doing it in that way, then the whole provenance of the security of your product is put in jeopardy. So thinking about, if you are selling cybersecurity product services into a government in particular, but people who demand that level of provenance, how do you actually show that what you're actually producing and putting into their environment is actually in good shape? That might be putting it through some NCSE scheme in order to get the right sort of certification or evaluation or accreditation. It might be having to prove to accreditors that you got the right sort of mechanisms in place. But I'd ask people to think about thinking about not where they are at the moment in terms of generating those sort of products, but think about the end state that says, when I start to deploy these sorts of things or when I start to sell them, what are the hoops and hurdles I'm going to have to jump through? And actually, have I done the things right at the beginning of the process that enables me to get through those hoops and hurdles with ease? Because they're harder to retrofit at the end of the process than they are at the beginning of the process. And they might feel like a bit of an overhead at the beginning of the process. And they might feel a bit cumbersome, but actually it will pay benefits longer term. So we certainly see lots of new products and services coming onto the market, but we see, as I said, people not quite thinking about the provenance and the chain, if you like, in order to get to the point where they are being able to deploy and sell products. And we're also seeing differences across government, even at the same security classifications, as to what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. So you get some variation in accreditors' stance about the way in which various things are configured, or in, the provenance of various devices, products, services. So for instance, you will get still very much a difference between cloud-based solutions and on-premise solutions, for example, across government, where some people are already jumping into cloud with both feet, and then others who are still very much wedded to their on-premise capability. So suppliers need to think about being able to efficiently develop a set of products and services that will cover both of those types of scenarios, where you need to deploy on-premise or you need to deploy in the cloud, and how you do both of those efficiently and effectively.
And just picking up on an earlier point you made on the skills space, I suppose it's a kind of two-pronged question, in that, you know, there's the kind of higher end of skills that are required for performing technical roles, so cyber-specific jobs, but then the kind of general awareness that everyone increasingly needs across the population. Do you see those both improving at the same rate? And also, kind of harking back to the question I asked earlier about the difference between the public sector and the private sector, do you see a difference there in terms of capability?
Yeah, so in terms of public and private sector, I think there is more of an awareness in government and public sector, particularly central government departments, around cybersecurity and what is good and what isn't good, and general awareness as well. I think linking back to what Lee was saying earlier on, when you look at some of the more sophisticated phishing attacks, that's where people can still be caught out and still be manipulated in some ways. So again, it's that sort of full spectrum thing of not just relying on technology, but relying on training and education and awareness, etc. And to a great extent, doing cyber exercises. I certainly did a few cyber exercises when we were in National Crime Agency, which were really quite straightforward exercises, but it actually puts you in the mindset of, should a cyber attack happen and you've done these things, these other consequences start popping out, then you deal with those, then a set of other consequences, etc., etc. So there certainly is something about sort of exercising people's mindsets in terms of cyber attacks and cyber events, and getting them to think more deeply about the consequences of some of those things. And when it comes to general education, I see a lot of initiative going on at all levels, you know, whether that is, as we talked about earlier, accredited degree courses, to education in secondary schools, and now we're seeing a lot of education in primary schools. We're seeing things like the Girl Guides being educated in cyber awareness. So there's a whole range of different initiatives going on. They might not all be connected, and they might all not be consistent, but certainly we're in a much better place than we were, and certainly that sort of cyber education is increasing. I think the one thing I would say is that we often talk about sort of millennials as being digitally native, and they are. They know how to operate an iPhone, backwards type thing. But do they understand about things that are happening underneath? Do they actually understand what's happening within the phone? We did a really good piece of work quite a while back with Kinetic, where we looked at a whole series of apps on a phone, and where the applications were beaconing to and how quickly they were beaconing. And we found one really well-known app which was beaconing to Beijing once a second, and that was happening in the background of your phone, and no one would have really known it. The user wouldn't have known it. So that sort of thing about really understanding the technology that you're using, rather than just a sort of superficial application layer, it is probably the next level of education about what is possible on the devices that you're using.
Absolutely, I think that point as well on kind of lots of organisations doing lots of different things is something where techUK is always keen to look at, and making attempts in this space be a bit more coordinated. And I'm sure that we'll hear a little bit more about the kind of improvements we've seen in the regions in that regard as well in the next session. So that's time on this session, Gerry. Thanks again, and I know we'll see you very shortly for the judging.